Thank you for the kind introduction, and great to be with all of you today. I always come to these AGC meetings feeling like I'm coming to be among friends. And you're always so gracious, and I have such great respect for what you do. I have, I guess I can say, a nephew in the room, Scott Harmer, because you know Scott. And Rich has been a good friend for many, many years, so it's just really nice to be here. And I come at such a remarkable time, all right? This year is something, of course, we will all remember. I worked at the Department of Health and Human Services with, Secretary Mike Levin. And I thought I'd just reflect on that for just a minute because of the circumstances we find ourselves in. When I worked at HHS, the avian flu was a big, big deal. This is the bird flu. This is H5N1. It was in Vietnam. Secretary Levitt was getting regular updates about it. Dr. Fauci was in the room time and time again giving those updates. I was a counselor to the secretary, and I just watched and learned with interest. But I learned a couple, even though that did not take off and did not become what COVID has become, I learned a whole bunch of really interesting things from that front row seat. And one of the most important things I learned is that pandemics do end. They do end. And we are almost 8 months into this one in our country, and we're going to get through this. And it is a rough, rough patch. Coming from the University of Utah, I can't tell you how hard it is to be in a situation where we're not hosting our students to the degrees we'd like to in person. It's just really hard to teach higher math and physics and anthropology and all the disciplines, and to be doing it under these circumstances. But pandemics do end. We're getting there. Now we've got a tough 10 weeks to go through here. We had an election. We've got an inauguration coming, and our country is swirling in the fog of an election that has let's just call it a transition that's not going to be very graceful, no matter where you stand on this. And in an environment where we have a public health emergency, an economic recession, and social unrest, it's really hard. And what I thought I would do today is just make the point. I want to give you just some national context. I want to make the point that it's different here in Utah. I want to emphasize how important construction is right now in the Utah economy, and that you are leading the way, and then make some suppositions about what's next. So on the national context, we have a U.S. economy that is really just moving sideways. It's a shock to the system, right? March and April happened, and the bottom fell out. That's seemingly from out of nowhere, we just got a shock. And we've been pushing our way back up, which feels like a V-shaped recovery, but then midsummer hit, and we just started moving sideways. And this is not a V-shaped recovery. It looked like, it had some of those characteristics initially, but it's a long, slow slog to get back to something that feels more normal. This is, U.S. real GDP, and it shows the recession, it shows the reopenings, and it shows how we just kind of move sideways for a time. I'm actually I want to have more questions, so I'm not going to show all these slides. There is something called the Back to Normal Index, and it is done by CNN and Moody's, and they look at all this data. It's not just government data, but a lot of private sector data, like open table reservations, movement indices from Google. They certainly look at TSA volume of traffic going on our airlines. And then they're looking at some of the normal, more government indicators, employment, unemployment. But what they did on the Back to Normal Index is they said, where were these indices in February? They create an index, and then they say, okay, where's it moving from here? And you can see how, and this is just showing different regions, but you can see how the US economy got to be about 60% of normal, or a 40% reduction in activity. And we've just been gradually working our way back up. And here we stand at about 80% of normal. So there's about 20% of the economy still missing, which is a sobering thought. And in an environment where 20% of the economy still isn't there, the thing that is true and that is consistently being shown in the data. This isn't a V-shaped recovery. It's not a U-shaped where you're down longer and then spring back up. It's not an L where you don't recover. It's not even the W where you have a double dip. This is a K-shaped economy. And there are people that are doing just fine, and then there are people that aren't doing well. And that's the two arms of the K, if you will. And so in the construction sector, you are one of those that is leading the way in terms of the data and what we're seeing in terms of activity. And that's a really good thing for the state. But just a reminder to you that there are lots of industries, particularly leisure and hospitality and mining, natural resources, energy, that are on the bottom side of the K-shaped. And I'll just give you a stat. In our leisure and hospitality sector, so this is entertainment, sporting, this is movie theaters, restaurants, all these things that you would associate with hotel room service and whatnot. Our state has lost 24,000 jobs there. I'm just going September to September. Got to go year over so you count for the seasonality. There's 24,000 fewer leisure and hospitality jobs in our state today than there were a year ago. That's really tough, right? And a lot of those are the jobs that are in that K-shape. Okay, so it's really different in Utah. And it's still really problematic, but it's different here. And I want to show you some data. This is job change September to September. And they're color coded, but the white or lighter colored states are the ones that are doing the very best. And you will see here how Utah ranks second among states for the smallest contraction, 0.9% contraction, while the nation is contracting over this time period by a minus 6.4%. So we're at 0.9, the nation's at 6.4. That's really different. It's orders of magnitude. Like normally you'd say, oh, we're half the contraction, and we're a third the contraction. But you can see it's even more than that. You can also see that Idaho and Colorado and Arizona, these are some of the states that have the smallest contraction. This is probably, in my opinion, the most interesting slide I'll show you. This is just showing you job change over time, and then the red line's Utah. The gray is the US. So Utah performs better, and it goes all the way back to 2010. Then COVID hits and the shock happens. But what I want you to see, and what I find so interesting, is that our very bottom in terms of contraction, when Utah was performing at its worst, so this would be April of 2020, we're about where the nation is today. See that, because the nation's up at that minus 6.4. That should be really telling, right? Because after 8 months of adapting and trying to adjust and trying to get the economy started up again, we are where the nation is right now where we were at our worst. And so it feels different here. And this is a very uneven contraction. I just wanted to point out that eastern Utah has been particularly hard hit. These are unemployment rates. The red counties have the highest unemployment rates. And you can see eastern Utah. So this is Grand County where Moab is, that's tourism. This is the Uinta Basin where low commodity prices have still just not enabled the oil and gas industry to be doing what it could be. And some of the natural or national park counties that are so dependent. Okay, so one of the most common question I'm asked is, why is Utah doing so well relative to other states? And I point to 3 reasons. This map is one of them. We got a big chunk of payroll protection program monies. The dark green states here are the ones that got the highest percentage of PPP loans as a percent of their payroll. And Utah's in the 1 or 2 spot there. So there was a big stimulus. We weren't hurt as bad, but we got more than our fair share of stimulus monies. So that's a really good thing for our state. Second, we entered this downturn in much better shape as an economy. We were at our lowest unemployment rate in state history going into this. It was 2.5%. So we had a little bit more, headwind there, headroom there. And then the third thing is that Utah has a very diverse economy. I shared that with you in the past. But the hardest hit states are Hawaii, tourism, Nevada, tourism. It's very specialized economies that are specialized in the things that have been hard hit. And in Utah, because of our diverse economy, we have been hurt mightily in the tourism sector. We got a lot of other things going on. Well, so different in Utah. A little bit on construction leading the way, and this would be the second most important graphic I show you, and I'm uncomfortable that it's truncated the title, but I'll read it to you. Utah's tourism and energy sector hardest hit. So this is looking at September of 2019 to September of 2020. Total jobs, did they decline or did they increase? And you can see leisure and hospitality declining by about 16%, natural resources by 12%, see some other declines, but look at construction with a healthy 6.6% growth rate. And you are such a big part of that. Heavy building construction is strong and healthy in our state. And as an economist, what I do is a couple of things. One is I say, we want somebody to be doing well, so I'm glad you're doing well. Second, if you're doing well in an industry that has a high multiplier, like you buy a lot of things internally and you do a lot of things within our own economy, that's really popular. You are one of those. And then you have high wages. So those also spin out the economy. So super, you are leading the way, and it's not just heavy construction, but it's housing. We have a housing shortage in our state. In fact, let me just show you this. Our analysts estimate that we're about 53,000 units short of where we should be in our economy. So we look at household formation. How many new households need homes, need housing units? And we're about 53,000 short. And that's true in the pandemic or without the pandemic. And so that's another reason why construction is leading the way, because there seems to be unbelievable demand for housing. And if you look at this data, this is just showing housing unit construction, I think through July, so January to July, and it's showing you for total single-family apartments. But just look at that black line. We are at record levels for new housing construction. So we have a housing shortage, building a lot, but we're still not able to keep up demand. Those are good things for our economy. This is not such a great thing, but housing price appreciation or housing affordability is the big problem that state government has to spend more time thinking about. Mortgage rates are low, but monthly payments are going up, and the median sales price is in double-digit levels. All right, so different in Utah. Then what's next? And I committed to myself that I would come up here and leave the last 15 minutes for questions, because it's such an interesting time. So I'm disciplining myself to about 3 more minutes. And I just want to talk about what I see happening in this economy. This is a shock that's happening, and we'll get through it. And maybe it takes all of 2021. Maybe it feels a lot different by May, but we still have a ways to go here. But Arahant Hadi Roy has said that pandemics help us, we break with the past, and it becomes a new world. And this one's no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. And so economists call those structural changes. And so, there's always the business cycle, up and down. Coronavirus is not the business cycle. Coronavirus is a shock that's creating behavioral changes, technological changes, demographic changes that will be with us for some time. So that's that red line, a structural change. And the structural changes that we're watching are new banking paradigm. This is low interest rates for the foreseeable future that, for all reasons, we believe will go on for another couple of years, 2 to 3 years of us having more certainty about a low interest rate environment. That changes banking and it changes borrowing, obviously. Deglobalization, so this is the idea that we want shorter supply chains. We don't want to be as dependent. And that's something that can be really good for Utah, because we're at the center of the mountain states and we're crossroads, I-15, I-80, I-70, I-84, Union Pacific, all that it does here, the new international airport. We think this is actually a real plus for Utah, and with the inland port, we'll be provide growth incentives. Pink collar recession. There's not a lot of women in the room, but those of you that are here, this recession will be known as being very hard on women. it hurts the occupations that we dominate: hotel service workers, restaurant workers, airline attendants. So it hurts occupations that we're heavy in. It's also been really hard on working women. They've dropped out of the workforce. They're helping with their children. They're helping with education. And as they do that, they have to either re-enter the workforce at a disadvantage. You see what I'm saying? And so it's a pink collar recession. Zoomtown migration. This is the idea that a structural change that remote work will become much more dominant in the future. And so people can have more ability to live wherever they want, and they'll choose places with high amenities that are convenient, that are affordable. And believe it or not, even though it's becoming more and more affordable in our urban areas here, but Utah's extremely attractive in those areas. Outdoor recreation at our fingertips, you know, this airport that gives us so many direct flights a day to places if you need to be somewhere. And it's still a relatively convenient metropolitan area. So we think we'll become a Zoom town, and we're seeing that in the evidence, certainly in Summit County and Wasatch County. My office does the official migration numbers for the state, and we will learn later this month what they are, but we're anticipating in migration. Tech-enabled services, won't spend a lot of time on that. That's online education, telehealth, all those things. The number 6 is the biggest one in this crowd, the reckoning of commercial real estate. And you will know so much more about that than I will. But in the economic literature, it's this idea that the leisure hospitality sector will change, and we'll have fewer hotels moving forward, right, than we otherwise would have had. That's because business travel will change. So there's an example. Restaurants might be a short-term thing, but right now in commercial real estate, we think fewer hotels, fewer restaurants, more warehousing and distribution. So that's a big thing I know for this group. And the big wild card is what happens with commercial office space, given that you'll have more remote work, but you'll also have more distancing setups in commercial real estate that doesn't exist. And I'm sure you know a lot more about that than I do. Okay, you know what? I have more things to share, but I'm going to just stop with it right there and open it up for questions. And let's just do this. We've done this so much in the past, but if you will share your question, I'll repeat it for the crowd. And don't ask me any too hard political questions, but I'll try my best. With that, let's open it up. Who's got a question for me? I know you all are never shy to do that. Yeah, please, go ahead and yell that out.
Do these scenarios change depending on who is in the White House?
Okay, does the thinking about the economic forecast change depending on who's in the White House? It absolutely does. It's not that one is necessarily better than the other, it's that they're different. In the President Trump world, I would characterize less regulation being good for the economy. I would characterize the trade stuff as not so good. You know, I'm not convinced that a lot of the sort of unilateral trade things is actually good for the U.S. economy. That's, you know, my opinion. I'll jump to President-elect Biden, if I can say that. I think I can. President-elect Biden, what's good there is a more functional, at least federal government, because if Donald Trump is anything, he doesn't adhere to norms, and he takes on world leaders, and he takes on the World Health Organization, and some people really like that, but it's hard to think that creates stability and certainty, and I think economies like stability and certainty. The other thing that I think President-elect Biden would do well in is the virus. And I just say that because I do think there is a need for national leadership there. And the idea that states just compete for PPE or that we challenge the scientists at CDC, I don't think that's in our long-term interest, or I guess I should say our short-term interest, fighting a pandemic. And we know there's a relationship between the economy and the pandemic. So those would be my thoughts. The one place where they both will score poorly is on taking care of the debt. I think they'll both spend like drunken sailors. So those are just some quick thoughts. Other questions? Please, in the back there, Mr. Harmer. This is mine.
Talk about regulating commercial real estate. Drilling down on that a little bit, what do your office see as it relates to brick and mortar retail?
So drilling down on the reckoning of commercial real estate, number 6 in this list, what does our office see in bricks and mortar retail? Am I getting that right, Scott? Yeah. So, boy, it is such an interesting time. I'm of the opinion that there'll be less retail. I'm of the opinion, and these trends have been in place, but they've been accelerated by COVID. So, we were moving towards more remote purchasing of things, but now it's just gotten even more convenient, more common, and we're going to see more of it. So that means that there's some retail that continues to thrive, but it will be in pockets. I'll just give you an example. Like I think Fashion Place Mall will just continue to do really well. Fashion Place is strategically located. It is a hive of activity, and that's just my observation. A lot of strip malls along 9th East, State Street, Edward Road, different places. You can go to Davis County, Utah County. I think those are largely going to be converted to housing because housing affordability is a big deal. You're going to continue to see pressure on creating more affordable units, and in an environment where you need less retail, those are all in good locations, and so that will offset some of it. I hope that's a helpful question. I mean, a helpful way to respond, but in general, we're seeing a shift we've always been seeing it, but remote sales is taking off, and I'll tell you, where we're really seeing it is in the taxable sales data. This state, our tax return data on sales tax is robust during the recession. And it's because people are continuing to buy online, and they're also nesting. They're buying a lot for their homes. Home and garden stores, grocery stores, all at really high levels. Eating out, down. Clothing, down. Okay, who else has a question? Let's go to this table and then we'll go back there.
I have 2 questions for you, Natalie. One construction related. Is there anything on the horizon where our industry or business in general, do you anticipate any significant changes, what they might be, or improvements, worsening?
Yeah.
The second question is political. The history of Utah is plain to see. I've been coming to these meetings for nearly 40 years, and every time the message is that Utah is in better shape than anywhere else in the country. It's a tribute to our values. You talk about in-migration. It seems to me that in-migration includes a lot of people from places that do not share our values. The demographics is changing. Is that conversation taking place anywhere on Capitol Hill? And is there any concern about that? Because what we've done has worked. And the people coming from places that it hasn't worked.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so on the first question, and I'm going to assume that the question is, do I see anything on the economic horizon that you all should be worried about that we're not talking about? Am I getting this right? What's happening in the next year or so? Are there things I'm seeing that we should be talking about or thinking about? And I'm assuming that we're talking a little bit COVID here, because I have some background there. So,
not necessarily.
Okay.
General.
Okay.
Is it good or bad?
Okay. All right. Well, so I think that I'm basically, and it kind of connects to your second point, but Utah's a place to be right now, and not just because of COVID. It was before and it is after. I do want to comment on COVID, even though it wasn't part of your question, but we saw our governor do basically a statewide address. They preempted regular programming on Sunday night and used the alert system to tell us that he was doing that, to put on some statewide mask mandate and to tell us that we're only to socially gather outside of work under our own rooftops. And I can't tell you how hard it is for a governor to get to that point. This is just really difficult. But I do want to notice that they did not put restrictions on the economy. And that's because a lot has been learned since April. And the thing that they know is that contagion of this virus is not happening in formal settings, it's happening in informal settings. So they don't see it happening in the workplace, they don't see it happening in schools, they don't see it happening in places of worship, these sorts of things. They see it happening after school ends and the extracurricular activities of students. They see it happening in social gatherings of families that bring together families. And they also see it happening in a big way between 15 and 34-year-olds as vectors of transmission that are asymptomatic and they're spreading it in our state. And we have the highest percentage of our state's population in that cohort because we're young. Anyway, I mention that because there are dark scenarios that you can draw, but I believe that our state is on a path of continuing to do everything we can to manage hospital capacity and try to reduce case counts short of shutting down the economy. And I think that's good news for everybody. There is one kind of exception, and that is that restaurants and bars are always talked about. And it's because the masks come off, and because they're inside settings, and because people talk loud and project. Okay, that's not exactly your question. You're the one who dealt with the values and in-migration. This gentleman's, every time he's come to these meetings, he always hears Utah's doing better than other states. He thinks it's because of our values, and I completely agree. And so what's the deal when you have in-migration? Are we changing? The answer is we're absolutely changing. And you can put words to that. We're urbanizing, we're diversifying, we are aging. The in-migration is still much smaller than our natural increase. So our births still sustain our growth. Last year, I'm going to round here, we had about 24,000 more people move in than move out. So 24,000 net in-migration. But we've done that now for about 5 consecutive years. And so you're adding, over 100,000 Utahns. That's a new Sandy City that are all new people. A lot of them are past Utahns returning, but there's certainly a change afoot, and we are one of those states that's changing. So the question would be, what does that mean for our economy and our values? I think you have to keep investing in education. I think you have to keep, speaking about the things that we hold dear and why they're important. One other just factoid, our state is the best in the country at social mobility. It's a very egalitarian state with a large middle class, and if you are born in the lower fifth socioeconomically, your chances of rising are better here than any place. And they think that's because of our social capital, the ways that we collaborate and get along and our institutions work together. So we've got to hold on to that. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Let's do a couple more. I got maybe 2 more, Rich? Okay, oh, I said here and then I'll come to you, my buddy. Okay, yeah. So the question is, what is the likelihood of a stimulus, specifically for construction, or just the whole idea of new stimulus during this time? Okay. My belief is that we do need a new federal stimulus. I don't like borrowing money, but I think the consequences of not helping during this time of need are worse than borrowing at this point. And it is, in my judgment, a real mistake that we didn't get that done before the election. We'd be feeling the benefits of it right now. I got to think one's coming. The economy is not doing well. It will be smaller, particularly if the Republicans continue to hold on the Senate, and I'm just great with that, meaning the smaller stimulus. But I think you'll see somewhere between $1 and $2 trillion stimulus that will include expanded unemployment, probably new stimulus checks, certainly some small business assistance for targeted industries. They're thinking that we'll see, obviously, money for testing and healthcare and the like. So I think that's coming, and I think it's just a matter of time. It'll probably not happen until after the inaugural. And then it'll be a net good for our economy. In terms of state stimulus, there's help there too. Interestingly, our state has about $900 million sitting in a rainy day fund. We haven't spent a dime of our budget reserve accounts during this recession. Not a dime. And it's because we've had other means, we've had other abilities. They were actually able to increase funding for education during the special session because our revenues have been okay. Anyway, that 900 million remains there and can be used to help. And one of the things and we still have some CARES Act money to spend. You're going to see a big celebration of the arts. The arts in our state have been devastated, and you're going to see, I don't know, $5 million invested in a celebration of the arts for our state's 150th anniversary, just to prop up and help the arts sector. So you'll see some things like that. I'm not seeing anything real specific for the construction sector, other than help for socioeconomically or Utahns who have been laid off that will be getting money that will help them with their rents and with things that they're doing. Okay, let's do one last question. It's right here.
So it's kind of like his question a little bit. Earlier you talked about the leisure industry really taking a hit. There's all kinds of industries like the airlines, hemorrhaging cash. What you guys track it on a national level? Like pretty soon people are going to be saying we need a bailout, and bailouts are going to happen for various industries probably. And where now really where will that money come from?
Yeah. So the question is that bailouts are going to happen. Where's that money going to come from? And I completely agree. The number one bailout is going to be for the airline industry, and that will be part of that stimulus bill I just talked about. That is going to happen, and it's because it's considered a public good that we can get from one place to another, and it's not the airline's fault. So that one will happen. The money comes from borrowed money. There's no question about it. We just borrow money from the Chinese, essentially. And the one other thing I'll say about bailouts is that I don't see, well, I just think it's worth making this point. A lot of state and local governments are not fiscally responsible, and they need help. And it troubles me that our state has been fiscally responsible. And so I really don't want to have the moral hazard or reward states that have been profligate in their spending and whatnot. And that's one of the differences between what the House wants to do and what the Senate wants to do. The Senate, or the Republicans, don't want to reward state and local governments that have been fiscally irresponsible, and the House doesn't mind doing that. Okay, that wasn't a good way to end. The last thing I'll just say, my dean, Taylor Randall, someone I really admire, he told me a story today, and it just take 30 seconds, Rich. But he's studied a lot what happened way back when there were a lot of shipwrecks. And what happened to people that were in a shipwreck that succeeded and those that didn't. And it's something in business schools that they studied. You think of being in a shipwreck and you don't know when you're going to get help. There's all this uncertainty, and it brings out bad behavior and just some of the same things that we face today. Turned out that in these studies, they found that one of the best things that helped with your survival if you were in a shipwreck is how altruistic the people were, how kind were people. And to me, that's really important during this really difficult time, that if we think about our neighbors, if we help those in need, if we stay positive, stay hopeful, and spread that with others, it will help us. Thank you so much.